Okay, so President Trump's executive order comes out banning federal funds for gain-of-function research. And, that immediately brings up a ton of questions.
Right. Like, what is this research, actually? Why is it so controversial?
Exactly. And what does this ban really mean for science, for, getting ready for the next pandemic?
These are definitely the big questions we need to tackle. So today, we're doing a deep dive into gain of function. We want to unpack it, the good, the bad, the risks.
And this new executive order, of course.
Absolutely. The goal is to get past the technical speak and understand what's really going on here.
And to do that, we've pulled together quite a few different viewpoints. We're looking at scientific commentary
Yep.
from CIRAP, official White House stuff.
Plus Wikipedia for a general overview, news reports from places like Fox News and WUSF, and then some analysis from Global Biodefense and factcheck.org.
So a real mix of sources.
Yeah, the aim is to piece it all together for you, give you a clear sense of the research itself, the arguments swirling around it, and what blocking the funding might actually do.
Both for science and, well, for our ability to deal with future outbreaks.
Precisely.
Okay, let's get right to it then. Gain-of-function research. What are we actually talking about here? It sounds intense.
It can be. Basically, it's about genetically modifying an organism. You're trying to enhance one of its biological functions.
Enhance how?
Well, things like how easily it spreads,
Yeah.
its transmissibility,
Yeah.
or how sick it makes you, its virulence, or even what kinds of animals it can infect, its host range.
Okay.
Wikipedia had a pretty clear example.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine scientists tweaking influenza B, which usually infects humans and seals,
Right.
so that it could infect rabbits in the lab. That's gaining a new function, the ability to infect rabbits.
So scientists are deliberately making these bugs, I don't know, stronger? More capable? Why would they do that? It just feels risky on the face of it.
Well, the main reason given is usually about trying to get ahead of things. Proactive defense, you could say.
How so?
Wikipedia mentions using these methods to figure out how new infectious diseases might emerge. And then, develop vaccines or treatments before they become a huge problem.
Okay. Like trying to predict the enemy's moves.
Exactly. There was an expert from Northeastern University quoted in Fox News who called it scientific wargaming, trying to simulate worst-case scenarios to build defenses.
Wargaming with viruses.
Okay, that's a vivid image. But I think Wikipedia also mentioned a narrower definition, one that sounds even more concerning.
Yes, that's a key point. The term is also used more specifically for research that could potentially make a pathogen one that could cause a pandemic replicate faster or cause more harm in humans or, animals closely related to us, like mammals.
And that leads to this idea of dual-use research.
Precisely. DURC, dual-use research of concern. That's the term Wikipedia uses. It means the research could be used for good, like understanding disease, or for bad, like developing bioweapons or just accidentally causing harm.
Which brings in huge safety issues. Absolutely. Yeah. Biosafety preventing accidental release in the lab, and biosecurity preventing someone from stealing it or using it maliciously. These are central to the whole debate.
Okay, so that sets the stage for the controversy. What are the biggest fears driving this debate?
The absolute core fear, you see this in CI draft, WSF reports everywhere really, is creating a super dangerous bug in the lab.
Yeah.
That then gets out accidentally or on purpose and starts a pandemic. It's the nightmare scenario, isn't it?
Truly frightening. You mentioned CIDRAP highlighted arguments from Lipsitch and Galvani against these experiments. What were their main points?
They hit on a few key things.
Yeah.
First, just the basic risk of accidental release. Human error happens, equipment fails. Even if the risk is low at one lab, if lots of labs are doing it.
The overall chance goes up.
Right.
Yeah.
Second, they raised ethical questions. Does the potential benefit really outweigh such a catastrophic risk? They weren't convinced the claimed benefits, like for vaccine design or predicting outbreaks, were strong enough to justify it.
So it's not just can we do it safely, but should we be doing it at all?
That's a big part of their argument, yes. Considering the potential downside.
They also talked about something called epistasis. That sounds technical.
It is a bit, but the concept is important. Epistasis basically means that the effect of one specific gene mutation can depend heavily on all the other genes in that virus, its genetic background.
Okay, so
Lipsitch and Galvani argued this makes predictions from gain-of-function experiments tricky. You change one gene in virus A, and it makes it spread faster. You make the exact same change in virus B, even a closely related one.
And it might do something different, or nothing at all.
Exactly, because the genetic context, the background, is different. It makes it harder to say, this specific change is the key to making a bird flu jump to humans, for example. Nature is more complex.
Were there specific examples like that MIT study or the PB2 protein?
Yeah, C.I. mentioned the MIT study, where researchers put known risky mutations from other experiments into a slightly different H5N1 flu virus. And the results weren't what they expected based on the previous work.
Huh.
And the PB2 mutation, E627K, initially it looked like a key factor for making flu viruses nastier and more transmissible in mammals. But later research, even from some of the labs that first flagged it, showed it wasn't a universal rule. It didn't have the same effect in the 2009 H1N1 pandemic strain, for instance.
So context is everything. You can't just isolate one gene change and assume it's always bad news.
That's the takeaway. It's more complicated.
Yeah.
But of course, there are strong counterarguments, too.
Right, the arguments for doing this research.
Yes. Wikipedia highlights proponents who say this is crucial for understanding things like how viruses become airborne. They point to those Kawoka and Fessier ferret studies with H5N1 flu.
Ah, yes, the ferret studies. Those cause a stir.
They certainly did. The idea was to see what changes allowed H5N1, primarily a bird flu, to spread between mammals through the air. Proponents say that knowledge is vital for making targeted vaccines or drugs.
But didn't CIDRAP push back on the ferret model itself?
Yes, Lipsitch and Galvani question how well ferrets truly predict what happens in humans. They're considered the best animal model we have for flu, sure, but they're not perfect replicas. So drawing firm conclusions about human pandemic risk just from ferrets? Well, it has limits.
It really sounds like a deep divide in the scientific world. Wikipedia mentioned two groups, the Cambridge Working Group and Scientists for Science.
That's right, they represent the two poles, essentially. The Cambridge Working Group emerged after some lab safety incidents and basically called for a pause. Let's stop doing this really risky stuff, they said, until we can properly assess the dangers and maybe find safer ways.
And the other group, Scientists for Science.
They argued the opposite, that this research is absolutely essential for fighting infectious diseases and, crucially, that it can be done safely if you have the right oversight and strong safety protocols. They favored improving safety, not stopping the research.
So, improve the labs, don't ban the science.
That was their position, yeah.
Mhm.
It highlights this fundamental tension, risk tolerance versus the drive for knowledge.
Okay, understanding that debate really helps frame the executive order. So let's get into the details of the ban itself. What did the Trump administration actually do?
Well, according to Global Biodefense, Fox News, WUSF, the main thrust is stopping federal money, U.S. taxpayer money, from funding gain-of-function research in what they call countries of concern.
Like China.
China and Iran were named as examples, yes. But it also puts pretty significant new restrictions on this kind of pathogen research happening within the U.S., too.
So it's not just about foreign research.
No, it affects domestic research quite broadly as well.
What was the official reason given? The White House rationale?
The White House fact sheet, as reported by Fox News, framed it as improving the safety and security of biological research. They want to reduce the risk of lab accidents or releases. And they specifically mentioned the contested origin of COVID-19 and also the 1977 Russian flu as potential examples of lab-related incidents.
And administration officials were quite vocal about this, weren't they?
Oh, definitely. WSF and others quoted White House Secretary Will Scharf pretty directly linking gain-of-function research to the start of the COVID pandemic, stating as a belief.
Right.
And you had HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya supporting the ban because of the leak risks. FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Massari used strong language, too, calling it crazy to be, quote, messing with Mother Nature in labs.
Pretty strong words. But Global Biodefense had a different take on the motivation behind it.
They did. They suggested the ban might be more politically motivated, maybe reflecting a kind of general mistrust of science, and warned that it could actually end up weakening important scientific tools we need for pandemic preparedness.
So the White House gives a safety rationale, but others see potential political undercurrents or unintended consequences.
That seems to be the tension, yes. What are the real drivers, and what will the actual effects be?
Which leads perfectly into the reaction from scientists and public health folks. What are their main worries about this ban?
A huge concern, you hear this from Global Biodefense, WUSF, experts like Dr. Kristen Matthews at Rice University. It's that stopping this research could hamstring our ability to respond to future pandemics.
How so?
Well, the argument is if you don't do this kind of research, you might not have the data you need to quickly develop diagnostics, treatments, vaccines, When a new dangerous virus pops up naturally, you won't understand its mechanisms as well.
It's like you stop studying the enemy's tactics.
Kind of. And global biodefense made that interesting point about nature itself,
Oh yeah, what was that?
that nature's constantly running its own gain-of-function experiments. Viruses are always mutating, evolving, gaining new abilities. If we restrict our ability to study these processes in the lab under controlled conditions,
We might be caught flat-footed when nature throws a curveball.
that's the fear. We might be less prepared for what emerges naturally because we weren't allowed to anticipate it in the lab.
But to be fair, there are scientists who strongly support these kinds of restrictions, right? Because of the safety risks.
Absolutely. People like Richard Ebright at Rutgers, who USF notes is a proponent of the lab leak theory for COVID-19. He argues that restricting or banning this research is necessary precisely because the risk of accidental release or even deliberate misuse is just too high.
So the safety argument cuts both ways. Lack of research hinders preparedness, but the research itself carries risk.
It's a genuine dilemma.
What about the bigger picture, like America's role in science, global health?
Global biodefense raised that too. Concerns that this ban could hurt U.S. leadership in biotech if collaborations get cut off, especially with researchers in potential hotspot regions.
We lose visibility.
Yeah, potentially. It could hinder global surveillance for new threats and weaken overall global health security if the U.S. pulls back from this kind of international scientific engagement.
And this all keeps circling back to COVID-19 origins, doesn't it? How did that feed into the ban specifically?
Well, the whole gain-of-function debate just exploded because of COVID-19. As sources like Wikipedia and WSF lay out, the theory that COVID might have leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, possibly involving gain-of-function experiments. That theory gained a lot of political momentum, especially within the Trump administration, even though most scientists lean towards a natural zoonotic origin.
Right. And Dr. Fauci denied NIH funded that specific type of research there.
He did deny funding gain-of-function research at Wuhan, yes. But as critics like Richard Ebright point out, and Wikipedia touches on this, there's disagreement about what exactly counts as gain-of-function. Some argue that some NIH-funded coronavirus research at Wuhan could fit the definition, depending on how you interpret it. It gets complicated.
Very messy. Okay, so if gain-of-function research is now restricted, what are the alternatives? Are there other ways to get ready for pandemics?
Lipsitch and Galvani, back in that CID wrap commentary, suggested several other paths.
Such as?
Things like studying existing viruses that already transmit between humans and tracing their ancestors to see how they evolved, focusing on developing therapies that target the host us rather than specific viral mutations.
Oh, interesting. So drugs that help our bodies fight off any severe viral infection.
Kind of, yeah. Or pushing hard for universal vaccines like a single flu shot that protects against many different strains, even new ones. And just generally improving how fast we can make any vaccine when something new pops up.
So their point was basically understanding the exact mechanism of transmission through risky lab experiments isn't the only game in town.
Exactly. They argue that the main goal is saving lives. Right. And maybe these other research avenues are ultimately more promising and definitely less risky for achieving that goal, even if they don't answer every single molecular question about how a virus works.
Okay, so wrapping this up. Gain-of-function research. It's complex, has potential benefits for understanding diseases, but wow, does it carry risks. Big risks that have sparked intense debate and now this funding ban.
That's a good summary, and you have really strong opinions on both sides about whether we need this research, whether it's safe enough, and what cutting off funding will really mean down the line.
It really puts science and safety in direct tension.
It does. It forces a difficult balancing act between wanting to push the boundaries of knowledge and needing to be incredibly careful with potentially dangerous biological agents.
And for you listening to this, it's clear this isn't just some abstract scientific debate. It's unfolding now, and it could really shape how we handle infectious diseases and global health for years to come.
It really makes you think about how much risk is acceptable in the name of progress,
Oh.
especially when the potential downside is so catastrophic.
So here's the final thought to leave you with. Considering everything we've discussed, the potential benefits, the undeniable risks, the strong disagreements even among experts, what do you think is the most responsible path forward?
Should the focus be primarily on locking down potentially risky research? Or should it be more about pouring resources into making labs safer, doubling down on oversight, and really exploring those alternative research strategies we talked about?
It's a tough question with no easy answers. This conversation is definitely going to continue, and hopefully, this deep dive has given you a better handle on the nuances involved.